What would you do if your father was one of the most dangerous men in the world? What if everyone feared him, but you just called him Dad? This is the story of Juan Pablo Escobar, the son of Pablo Escobar, the most feared drug lord of the 20th century. But here's the twist. Juan Pablo didn't grow up afraid. He grew up in a big house, surrounded by money, gifts, and love. To him, his father wasn't a monster. He was a kind man, a fun dad. Only later did Juan find out who his father really was. And when he did, his world changed forever. Would you still love someone if you found out they caused so much pain? Could you forgive a man who brought so much death just because he loved you? Today we explore the life of a boy born into a kingdom of crime and how he walked away from that life, choosing peace over revenge. This is the Narco Files. If you're ready for more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. Now, let's begin. Life with Pablo Escobar. Juan Pablo Escobar was born on February 24, 1977. At that time, his father, Pablo Escobar, was already rising fast in Colombia's criminal world. Not long after, Pablo became one of the richest and most feared drug lords in the world. But to young Juan Pablo, things looked very different. He didn't see a dangerous man. He saw a loving father. Pablo would hug him, play games, and make sure the family had everything they could ever want. They lived in a huge home filled with luxuries, private zoos, swimming pools, and rows of shiny motorcycles. Pablo spoiled his children. One time, he gave Juan Pablo more than 30 motorcycles as gifts. To outsiders, it might have looked like a perfect, happy family. But behind all the comfort and toys, Pablo was running a violent empire. He was giving orders to kidnap, bomb, and even kill people. Even though he tried hard to keep that world hidden from his son, the truth has a way of showing up eventually. Learning the truth. As Juan Pablo got older, he started to notice that his life wasn't like other kids. Sometimes, the whole family had to leave the country without warning. Other times, they were always surrounded by bodyguards with guns. Something didn't feel right. One day, when Juan Pablo was just 7 years old, his father sat him down and told him something shocking. Pablo said he had killed a government minister, and now they had to escape to Panama. But instead of sounding guilty, Pablo told his son that he felt abandoned, that he had no other choice. To a young boy, this was very confusing. How do you understand something like that? How do you judge a father who shows you love but also admits to hurting people? It wasn't until many years later that Juan Pablo began to truly understand what his father had done. But even then, he didn't hate him. He couldn't. The same man who caused so much pain to others had also been the one who loved him deeply and stood by his family. Pablo's rise to power. Pablo Escobar grew up very poor in Colombia. He didn't see much hope in going to school, so he started doing small crimes to survive. At first, it was stealing things like tombstones or robbing small shops, but over time, he got into smuggling. Then he found the drug business, and that changed everything. By the 1980s, his group was smuggling most of the cocaine going into the United States. At one point, Pablo was making about 100, but as he gained power, he also became more afraid of losing it. And that fear made him more violent. He started killing anyone he thought might stand in his way, politicians, judges, even innocent people. In 1989, he brought down a passenger plane just because he thought someone he didn't like was on it. Over 100 people died. In another attack, he tried to kill the head of Colombia's security forces. The man survived, but 21 innocent people died, including children. Still, in the poorest parts of Medellin, many people saw Pablo as a hero. He gave them houses, parks, schools, and food. Some called him a Robin Hood. But behind that kindness was a man responsible for terrible things. A father and a son. Juan Pablo saw the side of his father that most people didn't. He saw a man who helped the poor and made sure his family was always happy. At home, Pablo was a playful, loving dad. He would sit down and play board games with his kids, especially Monopoly, but there was a catch. Pablo didn't like to lose. If things weren't going his way, he would cheat just to win. They played soccer too, but the match only ended when Pablo was ahead. That was how he was. He needed to be in control, no matter what. Even with all his faults, Juan Pablo didn't see a drug lord. He saw a father who hugged him, gave him gifts, and showed love in his own big, loud way. To the world, Pablo Escobar was a criminal. But to Juan Pablo, he was simply Dad. The fall of Pablo Escobar. In December 1993, Juan Pablo's world turned upside down. His father, Pablo Escobar, had been hiding for over a year after escaping from prison. Then one day, Pablo called Juan Pablo just to talk. But that phone call changed everything. Authorities were listening, and they used it to find Pablo's location. Not long after, he was found on a rooftop in Medellin. There was a shootout, and Pablo was killed. Just like that, the man Juan Pablo called Dad was gone. Juan Pablo was only 16 years old. At first, he was filled with anger. He even thought about getting revenge. But that feeling didn't last. After about 10 minutes, his heart shifted. He chose peace over hate. He stood in front of cameras and said he would not follow the path his father had taken. He would not become the next drug lord. And he meant it. He never looked back. Life on the run. After Pablo Escobar died, life fell apart for his family. All the money was gone. Other cartels took whatever was left. The government took their homes, cars, and land. In just a short time, they went from being one of the richest families in Colombia to having nothing. But it wasn't just about money. People started sending death threats. Enemies of Pablo wanted revenge, and they didn't care if it was his wife or children. The family tried to leave Colombia, but no airline wanted to sell them tickets. Even the United Nations turned their back on them. So, they did the only thing they could. They changed their names. Juan Pablo became Sebastian Marroquin. His mother and sister also chose new names. With these new identities, they were finally able to leave the country and start fresh in Argentina. But starting over wasn't easy. Not at all. Living in the shadow. Even after moving to Argentina, their past didn't leave them alone. People still judged them because of who Pablo Escobar was. The police kept a close eye on them. In 1999, Sebastian, who used to be Juan Pablo, was arrested. He was blamed for crimes like money laundering and kidnapping. But he hadn't done anything wrong. He was arrested only because he was Pablo's son. His sister Manuela, now called Juana, suffered too. She was filled with fear, sadness, and stress. The trauma was too much for her. She fell into deep depression and even tried to take her own life. Today, she lives with Sebastian, who protects and cares for her. Their life had completely changed. They once lived in a mansion with bodyguards and fancy things. Now, they lived in hiding, afraid, alone, and poor. Pablo always said he did what he did for his family. But in the end, it was his family that paid the highest price, choosing a different path. Even after all the pain, Sebastian chose to walk a different path. He didn't want to be a drug lord. He didn't want revenge. He wanted peace. He studied to become an architect and started building a new life. But he also felt a deep need to speak out. So, he began sharing his story. He gave talks in schools and events, warning others about the dangers of crime, drugs, and violence. He told people not to look up to his father. Pablo Escobar was not a hero, he said. He was a criminal who caused a lot of pain. Sebastian believes his father was responsible for around. Still, instead of running from the past, Sebastian decided to face it. He reached out to the families hurt by his father's actions. Even though he wasn't the one who caused their pain, he asked for forgiveness. That takes real courage. Forgiveness over revenge. What would you do if your father was blamed for so much pain? Would you try to get back to the world? Would you stay quiet and disappear? Sebastian didn't do either. Instead, he stood up and told the truth. He shared his story, not to defend his father, but to help others learn from it. He wanted people, especially the youth, to know that their future doesn't have to look like their past. He teaches that you don't have to follow in your parents' footsteps. You can choose a better way. You can choose kindness. You can choose peace. After many years, he stopped using the name Sebastian. Today, he calls himself Juan Pablo again. He's no longer hiding. He just wants to live an honest life, one that brings healing, not harm. Final thoughts. Juan Pablo Escobar's life is more than just the story of a drug lord's son. It's a reminder that even when you're born into darkness, you still have a choice. He could have become the next Pablo Escobar. He had the name, the power, and the connections. But he didn't choose that life. He chose peace. He chose honesty. He chose to live a different way and showed the world that you don't have to follow a bad path, even if you're raised in one. So what do you think? If Pablo Escobar had lived, would Juan Pablo have taken over the empire? Or do you believe he was always meant for something better? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this story powerful, there are more just like it waiting for you. Hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell so you never miss another deep dive. This is the Narco Files. Stay safe and stay curious.